The realtor called it charming and secluded, words that usually meant falling apart and in the middle of nowhere. He wasn't entirely wrong. The house stood on a rise overlooking Hollow Creek, a town clinging precariously to the folds of the Appalachian Mountains. It had belonged to my grandmother, the woman I barely knew, estranged from my mother for reasons never fully explained. Now, after her passing and my own recent job loss, it was mine. All mine. Rotting porch steps, peeling paint, and 10 acres of dense, whispering woods included. My first week was a blur of dust and spiders. Grandma Elara hadn't just lived here, she'd burrowed in. Every closet overflowed, every surface held a precarious stack of yellowed books or chipped ceramic figurines. It felt less like cleaning and more like an archaeological dig through a life lived in deliberate isolation. The town itself wasn't much better. Hollow Creek had maybe 200 souls, a single general store that smelled faintly of mothballs and cured ham, and a church whose steeple leaned like a drunkard. The locals were polite enough, offering tight-lipped nods as I drove my battered sedan through the main street, but their eyes held a watchful stillness that pricked at the back of my neck. They were curious, but not welcoming. It was on the 4th day, wrestling with a stubborn jam in the cellar door, that things started to feel truly off. The cellar wasn't on the house plans I'd found. It was just a heavy, bolted wooden door tucked away in the back of the pantry, obscured by shelves laden with dusty mason jars filled with things I couldn't identify. The bolts were rusted solid, requiring a crowbar and a significant amount of cursing to finally yield. Cool, damp air rushed out, thick with the smell of turned earth and something else, something faintly metallic, like old pennies. My phone flashlight cut a weak beam into the blackness, revealing rough-hewn stone steps descending sharply. Hesitantly, I started down, the heavy door groaning shut behind me, plunging me into near-total darkness save for my light. The cellar was small, barely 10 by 10, with a low ceiling that forced me to stoop. The floor was packed dirt. But it wasn't empty. Against the far wall, arranged in a semicircle, were dolls. Not porcelain baby dolls or cuddly stuffed animals, but figures crudely fashioned from corn husks, twigs, and dried mud. They stood about a foot high, their faces blank, featureless ovals. Some had strands of what looked disturbingly like human hair glued to their heads. Others had sharp pebbles pressed into their chests. There were maybe a dozen of them, silent and unsettling in the wavering beam of my light. A shiver traced its way down my spine. Folk art, I told myself, just creepy Appalachian folk art. Grandma was eccentric. But as my light swept across them again, I noticed something clutched in the twig hands of the centermost doll. A small, leather-bound book, no bigger than my palm. My curiosity outweighed my unease. I carefully plucked the book from the doll. The leather was brittle with age. Opening it, I found the pages filled with cramped, spidery handwriting. Grandma Elara's handwriting. Most of it was mundane weather observations, notes on canning, complaints about the price of feed. But then, near the end, dated just a few months before her death, I found an entry that made my blood run cold. October 17th. The nights grow longer. He watches from the trees again. Didn't take the offering last night. The roots are thirsty. Must remember the ritual. Must feed the roots soon, or he will come into the house. He watches. Feed the roots. The words echoed in the damp silence of the cellar. Offering. Ritual. What the hell had my grandmother been involved in? I flipped back a few pages, scanning for more context. September 29th. Sheriff Brody stopped by. Asked about the Peterson boy again. Told him the same. Haven't seen him. Some city folk just ain't suited for these woods. They wander off. The woods take them. The Peterson boy. I vaguely remembered hearing about a hiker who'd gone missing in the area the previous fall. They'd never found him. The woods take them. My grandmother's dismissive tone felt chillingly final. Suddenly, a sound from upstairs. A faint creak of floorboards directly above the cellar. My heart leaped into my throat. I wasn't expecting anyone. The house was supposed to be empty. Snapping the journal shut, I clicked off my flashlight, plunging the cellar into absolute blackness. I held my breath, straining to hear. Another creak, closer to the pantry this time. Someone was in the house. And they were heading for the cellar door. Panic seized me, cold and absolute. Trapped in the dark, earthen cellar, with those blank-faced dolls seemingly watching, and someone stealthily moving towards the only exit. My breath hitched in my throat. I fumbled for the crowbar I'd left near the steps, my fingers closing around the cool metal. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. Above, the pantry floorboards creaked again, directly over the cellar door. A faint scraping sound followed, like something heavy being dragged. Were they trying to barricade the door? Or open it? My mind raced. Grandma Elara had bolted it from the pantry side. They'd need tools, maybe the same crowbar I now held. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The metallic tang in the air seemed stronger now. Waiting in the pitch black felt like an eternity. Every tiny sound amplified, the drip of moisture down the stone wall, the frantic thudding of my own heart against my ribs. I strained to hear any noise from above, any indication of what the intruder was doing. Nothing. Maybe they'd given up. Maybe they hadn't even known about the cellar. Hope flickered, fragile but desperate. I had to get out. Staying down here felt like waiting in a tomb. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I edged towards the stone steps, crowbar held ready. Each step upward felt treacherous in the dark. My hand reached the bottom of the heavy wooden door. It felt cool and solid. I pushed gently. It didn't budge. Bolted, just as I'd thought. Then, a faint sound from the other side. Breathing. Slow, deliberate, raspy breaths, right near the door. They were still there. Waiting. My blood ran cold. Were they listening for me? Did they know I was down here? I backed away slowly, retreating down a couple of steps, pressing myself against the damp cellar wall. The silence returned, broken only by that soft, unnerving respiration, just inches away through the wood. Minutes crawled by. The breathing continued, rhythmic and patient. It wasn't human breathing. It was too steady, too guttural. Like an animal resting. An image flashed in my mind, Grandma's journal entry. He watches from the trees again. Was he now waiting outside the cellar door? I couldn't stay here. The air felt heavy, pressing in. The featureless dolls seemed to lean closer in the oppressive darkness. I had to find another way out, but there wasn't one. Just the bolted door and the dirt floor. Dirt floor. An idea sparked, wild and desperate. Grandma's journal mentioned roots. Must feed the roots. What if there was something under the cellar? I dropped to my knees, ignoring the damp chill seeping into my jeans, and felt around the packed earth near the wall where the dolls stood. My fingers scrabbled, searching for any inconsistency, any loose patch. Beneath the semicircle of dolls, the dirt felt slightly softer, less compacted. Heart pounding, I started digging with my bare hands, clawing away the earth. It came away easily, revealing darker, richer soil underneath, tangled with thick, fibrous roots I hadn't noticed before. The metallic smell intensified, mixed now with a cloying sweetness, like rotting fruit. I dug faster, the adrenaline overriding the protest of my scraped fingers. My hand hit something hard. Wood. Scraping away more dirt, I uncovered the edge of what looked like a small, wooden trapdoor, almost completely obscured by the network of roots. It was barely 2 feet square, held shut by a simple iron ring latch embedded in the wood. Hope surged. This had to be it. But as I reached for the latch, the breathing on the other side of the main cellar door stopped. Silence. Then, a sharp, metallic click. The sound of a bolt sliding back. Terror jolted through me. They were opening the door. I scrambled back from the trapdoor, flattening myself against the far wall as the main cellar door creaked open. A sliver of dim light from the pantry cut into the blackness, widening as the door swung inward. A figure filled the doorway, silhouetted against the weak light. Tall, stooped, draped in something dark and shapeless. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there, letting the silence stretch. I could see the faint outline of its head, tilted slightly as if listening. It wasn't the raspy breathing I'd heard before. This felt different. Colder. More deliberate. Then, slowly, deliberately, it raised a hand. Not towards me, but towards the pantry light switch. With a soft click, the cellar was plunged back into utter blackness. The door creaked shut, and I heard the bolt slide home again. Locked in. Locked in the dark with whatever knew I was down here. And whatever lay beneath the hidden trapdoor. Absolute darkness pressed in, heavy and suffocating. The silence was profound, broken only by the frantic pounding of my own blood in my ears and the faint, almost imaginary drip of water somewhere in the cellar. The figure was gone from the doorway, the bolt firmly back in place, sealing me in this subterranean pocket, with the crude dolls, and whatever secrets lay beneath the dirt floor. My breath came in ragged gasps. The lingering scent of damp earth, and that sickly sweet, metallic odor filled my nostrils, thicker now, almost cloying. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, a primal urge to scream and beat against the unyielding door. I forced it down, biting my lip until I tasted blood. Panicking wouldn't help. I needed to think. Whoever, or whatever, had opened that door knew I was here. They hadn't come in. They hadn't attacked. They'd simply observed, then sealed me back in the dark. Why? Were they playing with me? Or was there something else down here they wanted me to deal with? Or be dealt by? My thoughts immediately went to the trapdoor. It was my only potential escape, however slim. The memory of the roots covering it, thick and strangely fibrous, flashed in my mind. Must feed the roots. Grandma Elara's words seemed to whisper in the darkness. What did she feed them? And what did the watcher at the door expect me to do now? There was no choice. Staying here meant waiting passively for whatever horrors this place held. The trapdoor, at least, offered action, a potential path forward, even if it led somewhere worse. Groping my way back across the packed earth, my hands brushed against the unnerving texture of the corn husk dolls. I recoiled instinctively before forcing myself to navigate past them, back to the spot where I'd uncovered the hidden wooden square. Kneeling again, I felt for the iron ring latch. My fingers, still raw from digging, fumbled in the darkness before finding the cool metal loop. I pulled. At first, nothing happened. The trapdoor felt swollen, stuck fast in the damp earth. I braced my feet, took a firmer grip, and yanked harder. Wood scraped against dirt and roots. With a low groan, the trapdoor shifted, lifting an inch. A new smell wafted up from the opening, colder, damper, and intensely earthy, like freshly turned soil after a hard rain, but with an underlying current of decay. Prying my fingers under the edge, I lifted the trapdoor fully. It was heavier than it looked, thick waterlogged wood. I propped it open against the cellar wall, revealing a square of blackness even deeper than the cellar's own. Switching my phone light back on, heart hammering, I aimed the beam down. It wasn't another room. It was a tunnel, barely wide enough for me to squeeze through, heading straight down into the earth. Unlike the cellar steps, this wasn't stone, it was rough dirt walls, densely packed with those same thick, pale roots I'd seen covering the trapdoor. They snaked everywhere, like veins in diseased flesh, pulsing faintly in the flashlight beam. The sickly sweet, metallic smell was overpowering now, emanating directly from the tunnel. Must feed the roots. The phrase echoed again. Was this where Grandma Elara came to feed them? With what? The implications were horrifying. I scanned the beam around the tunnel entrance. No steps, just a sheer drop into root-choked darkness. It looked like a burrow, an animal den, not something meant for human passage. Hesitation gnawed at me. This felt deeply wrong, like stepping into something ancient and forbidden. But what choice did I have? The watcher at the door had locked me in. Maybe this was the intended path. Taking another shaky breath, I sat on the edge, swung my legs into the opening, and lowered myself down. My feet immediately tangled in the dense network of roots. They felt strangely yielding, almost fleshy under my boots. Using them as handholds and footholds, I began the descent. The tunnel was claustrophobic, the roots pressing in from all sides. My flashlight beam barely penetrated the oppressive darkness below. The air was thick, making it hard to breathe. With every foot I descended, the pulsing of the roots seemed to grow stronger, a low, rhythmic throb I could almost feel in my own chest. Were they alive? After what felt like 10 or 15 feet of vertical descent, the tunnel began to level out slightly, angling downwards rather than straight down. I could now half crawl, half slide along the root-covered floor. The pulsing intensified. Up ahead, I saw a faint, phosphorescent glow, casting eerie shadows through the tangled roots. As I neared the source of the light, the tunnel widened abruptly into a small cavern. And what I saw made me freeze, my breath catching in my throat. The cavern floor was a writhing mass of the pale, thick roots, all converging on a central point. And in that center, nestled within the pulsating roots, glowing with that faint, sickly green light, was something else. It looked like a heart. A huge, grotesque, pale heart, easily the size of a pumpkin, embedded in the earth and roots. Veins, thick as my arm, snaked out from it, merging seamlessly with the surrounding root network. It pulsed slowly, rhythmically, in time with the throb I'd felt in the tunnel. And with each pulse, the sickly sweet, metallic smell washed over me in waves. This was the source. This was what Grandma Elara fed. Staring, mesmerized and horrified, I didn't immediately notice the figure kneeling beside the grotesque heart, its back to me. It was small, hunched, clad in rags. Slowly, it turned, and the phosphorescent light illuminated its face. It wasn't human. Gaunt, pale, with large, black, sightless eyes sunk deep into its skull. Its mouth was a lipless slit that stretched too wide, opening and closing rhythmically, emitting a faint, dry clicking sound. It held something in its long, spindly fingers, the shard of bone, maybe, which it rhythmically scraped against the surface of the pulsating heart. The creature's head swiveled towards me, those empty black eyes fixing on my light. The clicking stopped. Its mouth stretched wider, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. And then, from deep within its throat, came a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the very roots beneath my feet. It knew I was there. And it looked hungry. The creature unfolded itself from its kneeling position with an unnatural fluidity, its limbs seeming to unjoint and reassemble as it rose. It was taller than I'd initially thought, nearly my height, but rail-thin, its ragged clothes hanging loosely on its skeletal frame. The growl deepened, echoing strangely in the small cavern, and it took a hesitant, shuffling step towards me, its long, pale fingers twitching. My flashlight beam stayed locked on its horrifying face, the sunken, sightless black eyes, the lipless, clicking maw. Fight or flight screamed through my veins. The tunnel I'd come through was the only way out, narrow and choked with roots. Could I possibly scramble back up before this thing reached me? It took another step, faster this time, its bare feet making soft, wet slapping sounds against the root-covered floor. Its head tilted, the clicking sound growing more rapid, almost like insect chittering. It sniffed the air, its wide mouth stretching impossibly further. I stumbled backwards, raising the crowbar instinctively. It felt pitifully inadequate against whatever this was. "Stay back," I choked out, the words barely a whisper. The creature paused, its head cocked as if processing the sound. It didn't seem to understand the words, but the tone, the fear, perhaps registered. It let out a low hiss, and saliva, thick and pale like the roots, dripped from its mouth. My light flickered slightly. Battery dying. Or something else. I glanced desperately around the cavern. Roots everywhere, the pulsating heart casting that sickly green glow, and this thing advancing on me. No other exits. No weapons besides the crowbar. The creature lunged. Not a run, but a sudden, jerky bound that covered half the distance between us in an instant. I swung the crowbar wildly, connecting with its outstretched arm. There was a sickening crack, like dry branches snapping, but the creature barely flinched. It hissed again, louder, angrier, and swiped at me with its other hand. Long, bone-like claws raked across my forearm, tearing through my jacket and drawing blood. Pain seared through my arm. I staggered back, bumping against the cavern wall. The roots covering the wall writhed slightly at the contact. The creature advanced again, its clicking mouth opening wide, ready to bite. In desperation, I shone my flashlight directly into its black, sightless eyes. It recoiled violently, letting out a high-pitched shriek that pierced my eardrums. It stumbled back, clawing at its face as if burned. Light. It reacted to the light. But my advantage was short-lived. The grotesque heart in the center of the cavern suddenly pulsed harder, faster. The sickly green glow intensified, flooding the cavern with pulsing light. The roots on the floor and walls began to writhe more vigorously, thickening, reaching. The creature, momentarily stunned by my flashlight, seemed to draw strength from the heart's accelerated pulse. Its shriek subsided into a low growl again. It ignored my flashlight now, its attention fixed solely on me, its lipless mouth stretching into a horrifying semblance of a grin. And then, the roots around my feet tightened. I looked down in horror to see the pale, fleshy tendrils wrapping around my ankles, holding me fast. They pulsed in time with the giant heart, their grip like living vines, cold and unnervingly strong. I tried to pull free, hacking at them with the crowbar, but they were too thick, too numerous. The creature began shuffling towards me again, confident now, its prey secured. Its clicking intensified, a triumphant, hungry sound. The giant heart pulsed faster still, the green light throbbing, the sickly sweet smell becoming almost unbearable. I was trapped, anchored by the living roots, facing a creature drawn from nightmare, deep beneath my grandmother's house, with the only escape route blocked by the very thing that held me captive. The creature raised its clawed hand, ready to strike again, and its lipless mouth opened wide, revealing rows upon rows of needle-sharp teeth. My world narrowed to the horrifying visage of the creature leaning over me, its clicking maw opening wider, the stench of decay, and something indefinably other washing over me in a suffocating wave. The pulsing green light from the giant heart cast grotesque, shifting shadows across its gaunt features, highlighting the hunger in those empty black eyes. The roots around my ankles squeezed tighter, biting into my flesh, anchoring me for the kill. There was no time for conscious thought, only raw, primal instinct. As the creature lunged, its needle-sharp teeth aimed at my throat, I reacted. With a surge of adrenaline, I jammed the head of the crowbar upwards, wedging it against the roof of the creature's mouth, just behind its front teeth. Its jaws clamped down instinctively, teeth scraping against the metal. The force was immense, jarring my already injured arm, but the crowbar held. The creature let out a frustrated, gurgling screech, its long, spindly limbs flailing as it tried to dislodge the metal bar. Its claws raked uselessly at my chest, deflected by the crowbar I held desperately between us. But the roots held me fast. I couldn't push it away, couldn't gain any leverage. It was a stalemate, a terrifyingly intimate struggle in the pulsating green light, my strength rapidly failing against its unnatural power. Its sightless eyes bored down into mine, and I could feel its cold, ragged breath on my face. Suddenly, the giant heart gave a particularly violent pulse. The green light flared blindingly for a second, and the roots around my ankles constricted with agonizing force. I cried out, my grip on the crowbar faltering. The creature seized the momentary advantage, twisting its head violently. Metal shrieked against bone and tooth. The crowbar was ripped from my grasp, flung away into the darkness at the edge of the cavern. Disarmed, held fast, I stared up as the creature loomed again, its mouth now free, dripping pale saliva and flecks of my blood. This was it. No more tricks, no more tools. But as it prepared to strike, something strange happened. The roots around my ankles, the ones connected to the giant, pulsating heart, didn't just hold me, they began to change. The pale, fleshy surface started to glow faintly, not with the heart's green light, but with a dim, reddish hue. And I felt something else, a warmth spreading from them, seeping into my legs, oddly comforting despite the crushing pressure. The creature paused, its head tilting again, the clicking sound slowing. It seemed confused, its lipless mouth working silently. It lowered its head, sniffing at the roots wrapped around my legs, its black eyes fixed on the faint red glow now emanating from them. What was happening? Was it the blood? My blood, dripping from my arm wound onto the roots. Must feed the roots. Was this the feeding Grandma Elara wrote about? The creature let out a low, uncertain whine. It backed away a step, its attention shifting from me to the roots, then to the giant, pulsing heart. The heart's rhythm seemed to falter slightly, the green light flickering erratically. The creature hissed, scraping its bone shard against the heart's surface again, faster this time, as if trying to soothe it or re-establish control. The red glow in the roots around my ankles intensified. The warmth spread further up my legs, accompanied by a faint tingling sensation. And then, I felt a pull. Not a physical pull, but something deeper, stranger. A draining sensation, as if something was being drawn out of me through the roots. My energy. My life force. The creature shrieked again, this time not in anger, but what sounded like fear. It abandoned the heart and scrambled backwards, stumbling over the writhing roots on the cavern floor, retreating towards the darkness from which it had emerged. It glanced back at me, at the red glowing roots, its lipless mouth contorted in something akin to terror, before disappearing completely into the shadows. Silence fell, save for the now unsteady pulsing of the giant heart, and the low hum emanating from the roots still coiled tightly around my legs. The red glow began to fade, the warmth receding, leaving behind a profound coldness, and a dizzying sense of weakness. The draining sensation stopped. The roots loosened their grip slightly, no longer crushing, but still holding me. I lay there, panting, utterly bewildered. The creature had fled. It had been afraid, of me? Or of what the roots were doing? I looked down at my legs, expecting to see them withered or changed, but they looked normal, albeit pale and trembling. The wounds from the creature's claws still bled sluggishly. Slowly, cautiously, I tried to pull my feet free. The roots resisted for a moment, then, surprisingly, retracted, slithering back into the earth floor like pale worms, leaving my ankles bare. I was free. Pushing myself up into a sitting position, every muscle screaming in protest, I stared at the giant, erratically pulsing heart. The green light flickered like a dying bulb. What had I done? Had feeding the roots, inadvertently, with my own blood, somehow disrupted this place? Weakened the heart? Frightened its guardian? My phone lay nearby where I'd dropped it, its light still miraculously on. I retrieved it, the beam feeling weak against the cavern's gloom. The crowbar was nowhere in sight. I had to get out, back up the root tunnel, before the creature returned, or before whatever connection I'd formed with this place did something worse. But as I turned towards the tunnel entrance, my light swept across something else near the base of the heart, something half buried in the roots that I hadn't noticed before. It was a small, wooden chest, dark and intricately carved, almost swallowed by the pulsating roots growing around it. And nestled beside it, glinting faintly in my light, was a single, tarnished silver key. Weakness washed over me, a profound exhaustion that made even lifting my phone feel like a monumental effort. My limbs trembled, chilled despite the humid, cloying air of the cavern. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to claw my way back up the root-choked tunnel and escape this subterranean nightmare. But my eyes kept drifting back to the small, dark wooden chest half swallowed by the now erratically pulsing roots near the base of the giant heart. And the tarnished silver key lying beside it. Why was it here? Was it left by Grandma Elara? Part of the ritual? Or something connected to the creature that guarded this place? The key glinted dully in my flashlight beam, seemingly ancient yet purposefully placed. It felt like a deliberate breadcrumb, a puzzle piece I couldn't ignore, despite the overwhelming danger. My legs protested, shaky and sore, as I forced myself to crawl the few feet towards the heart. The roots beneath me felt sluggish now, their pulsing less vigorous than before, the faint red glow completely gone. The giant heart itself seemed weaker, the green phosphorescence flickering dimly, its rhythm unsteady, like a dying heartbeat. Had my interaction, my blood, truly harmed it? Reaching the chest, I saw the intricate carvings covering its surface, not Appalachian folk symbols, but something older, stranger. Twisting, thorny vines intertwined with figures that were disturbingly similar to the creature I'd just encountered. The wood was dark, almost black, and strangely cool to the touch despite the cavern's humidity. The keyhole was small, tarnished like the key lying beside it. I hesitated, listening intently. Only the wet, unsteady thump-thump of the heart and the distant, imagined drip of water broke the silence. The creature hadn't returned. Not yet. Taking the silver key, its metal surprisingly heavy and cold in my trembling hand, I slotted it into the lock. It turned with surprising ease, a soft snick echoing in the cavern. Holding my breath, I lifted the lid. Inside, resting on faded velvet lining, were not treasures or horrors, but more journals. 3 of them, bound in the same aged leather as the one I'd found in the cellar, but smaller, more weathered. Beside them lay a single object. A dried, pressed flower, its petals a startlingly vibrant blue, unlike any flower I'd ever seen. And beneath that, something that made my stomach clench, a lock of dark, human hair tied with a simple ribbon. My hands shook as I picked up the topmost journal. Like the others, it was Grandma Elara's handwriting. The entries were dated much earlier, decades ago, shortly after she must have moved into the house. May 12th, found the way down. The path the old woman showed me before she passed. It is as she described. The heart pulses. The watcher clicks in the shadows. She said it guards the roots, nourishes them with what it brings back. Said the roots give life, a different kind of life. May 15th, brought the offering. As instructed. Buried it near the heart. The roots responded. The watcher seemed pleased. Left the chest, as the old woman instructed. A place to keep the records. A place for him. Him? My eyes scanned the cramped script. June 1st. He came. Through the roots. Not like the Watcher. Different. Older. He spoke, not with words, but in my mind. Showed me things. The woods outside. The hunger. The cycle. Said the heart needs balance. Said the Watcher grows weak alone. June 10th. He requires a vessel. A connection. Someone to tend the heart on the surface, to guide the offerings. Someone to share the longevity. The old woman lasted 50 years. He offers the same to me. Protection. Seclusion. An escape from the noise. In return for service. My blood ran cold. Grandma Elara hadn't just stumbled upon this place. She'd made a pact. She tended the heart. Guided offerings. The Peterson boy. The other missing hikers. Were they the offerings? Fed to the roots. Fed to the Watcher. I grabbed the next journal, flipping frantically. The dates jumped forward years at a time. Mundane entries mixed with cryptic notes about the heart's pulse, the Watcher's moods, the quality of the soil. Then, an entry that stopped me cold. August 3rd. Another vessel is needed. He feels the imbalance growing. The heart weakens without the counterpoint. He seeks one linked by blood. My blood. A vessel linked by blood. Me? Or my mother? Was that why she was estranged? Did she know about this? Refuse. My light flickered again, more insistently this time. The phone's battery was definitely dying. I grabbed the last journal, the smallest, most worn. It opened to a page near the end. October 19th, last year. He knows about the boy. The one who wanders. The one who calls himself Peterson now. He escaped the woods, but the roots still hold a piece of him. He lingers nearby. Watches the house. He is an imbalance. He must be returned to the roots. The hiker from the valley. The young man who'd warned me, then vanished. He was the Peterson boy. Grandma's journal implied she thought he was dead, taken by the woods. But this entry. He knows about the boy. Who was he? The entity Grandma communicated with. Suddenly, the giant heart gave a violent, wet lurch. The flickering green light died completely, plunging the cavern into near darkness, save for my rapidly fading phone light. The pulsing stopped. An unnerving silence descended, deeper than before. The roots beneath me went utterly still. Then, from the tunnel I'd descended, came a sound. Not the creature's clicking. Not the Watcher's raspy breath. But a low, dragging scrape. Something heavy, moving slowly, deliberately, down the root-choked passage. Coming for me. And the light on my phone finally died, leaving me in absolute, suffocating blackness with the dead heart, the journals, and the sound of something ancient and patient, dragging itself towards the place where the roots had just been fed. My breath hitched, trapped in my chest. The darkness was absolute, a physical weight pressing against my eyes. Gone was the faint green pulse of the heart, leaving only the cloying smell of decay and the terrifying, rhythmic scrape, drag, scrape, drag echoing from the root tunnel. It was slow, agonizingly slow, but undeniably getting closer. Each rasp of something heavy against the roots sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. This wasn't the frantic scuttling of the watcher, this felt ancient, deliberate, inevitable. He comes. Grandma Elara's words from the journal screamed in my mind. The entity she served, the one who spoke in her thoughts, the one who needed balance, the one who knew about the Peterson boy. It was coming. My body screamed to run, to scramble back up the tunnel, but logic, however frayed, held me rooted. Fleeing towards the sound, into that narrow, root-choked passage in total darkness, seemed suicidal. Hiding felt equally futile. Where could I hide in this small, now lightless cavern? Behind the dead heart. Under the still pulsating roots felt horrifyingly wrong, like burying myself alive. I clutched the small journals I'd taken from the chest, their worn leather a fragile anchor in the terrifying dark. My fingers brushed the dried, strangely smooth petals of the blue flower tucked inside one. My other hand still held the cold, heavy silver key. Useless trinkets against whatever was approaching. Scrape, drag. Closer now. I could hear displaced dirt trickling down the tunnel walls. I could almost feel the vibration through the cavern floor. My injured arm throbbed, my shoulder ached, my entire body felt drained and weak from the root's earlier feeding. I backed away from the tunnel entrance, stumbling over the now limp roots, pressing myself against the rough stone wall near where the chest lay. I sank to my knees, making myself smaller, trying desperately to control my ragged breathing, hoping the darkness would conceal me. The scraping stopped, right at the tunnel's exit into the cavern. A profound silence descended, heavier and more menacing than before. I could hear nothing, not even the drip of water. It was as if the very air held its breath. Then, a voice. Not spoken aloud, but echoing directly inside my skull, ancient and dry as dust, cold as the grave. So. The tendril finds a new host. The mental voice was devoid of inflection, yet carried an immense weight, a chilling authority that resonated deep in my bones. It wasn't addressing me exactly, more like making an observation. The heart is still. The watcher hides. And the old vessel is dry. A pause, filled only by the frantic drumming of my own heart. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it couldn't sense me, couldn't see in the dark. But the roots drank. Yes. New blood. Your blood. The voice grew closer, not physically, but in my mind, as if leaning in to examine me. I felt a cold, probing pressure against my thoughts, an alien intelligence assessing me. Stronger than the last. Unexpected. Unintended. Suddenly, the air in the cavern stirred. Not a draft, but a displacement, as if something immense was moving silently in the darkness right in front of me. The smell of turned earth intensified, mingled with the scent of ozone, like before a lightning strike. The cycle weakens. The balance shifts. The woods hunger. I could feel it now, a vast, ancient presence looming directly over me. It had no discernible shape in the blackness, more like a distortion, a cold spot that drank the non-existent light. I felt trapped, paralyzed not by roots, but by sheer, overwhelming terror. You carry the records, the voice observed, the cold pressure in my mind focusing slightly. You hold the key. It knew about the journals, the silver key I still clutched. The old vessel failed. She let the anomaly linger. Let the connection fray. A thread of something cold disapproval. Anger. Entered the mental voice. The imbalance must be corrected. The roots must be fed properly. I felt a phantom touch against my cheek, cold and dry like dead leaves. I flinched violently, pressing myself harder against the stone wall. You have tasted the connection. The roots know you now. You will serve. Serve? Like Grandma Elara. Become a caretaker for this thing. Guide offerings. Horror choked me. No. Never. As if sensing my defiance, the cold presence intensified. The heart is dormant, but the roots remain. They need tending. The woods need guarding. The crossing needs its toll. A vision flashed in my mind, unbidden, the terrified face of the Peterson boy, the watcher bursting him open, the wood swallowing him whole. Sacrifices. Tolls. You understand, the voice stated, devoid of emotion. You will tend the roots. You will bring the offerings. You will restore the balance. Or you will join the soil. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a statement of fact. A demand. My mind reeled. Trapped, weakened, facing an entity that spoke in my thoughts and seemed to command the very earth beneath me. How could I possibly fight this? But even as despair washed over me, a spark of defiance flickered. I wouldn't be its puppet. I wouldn't become another Elara, feeding monstrosities in the dark. I still had the key. You hold the key, it had said. Did the key mean something more? As the cold presence waited, seemingly patient, for my inevitable submission, my fingers tightened around the tarnished silver key. An idea, insane and desperate, formed in the terror-stricken recesses of my mind. The chest. The key opened the chest where the journals were kept. What if it opened something else too? The cold pressure in my mind sharpened. Do not resist. Serve the cycle. Ignoring the mental command, ignoring the crippling fear, I lunged forward blindly in the dark, towards where I remembered the dead heart and the small wooden chest. My injured shoulder screamed, my body felt sluggish, but desperation fueled me. My outstretched hand hit the cool wood of the chest. I fumbled, finding the keyhole, jamming the silver key in. This is insane, a part of my mind screamed. What are you doing? Foolish tendril, the voice hissed in my skull, a wave of cold anger washing over me. There is no escape. Only service, or the soil. I turned the key. Not in the chest lock, but in the earth beside it, plunging the silver point deep into the mass of dormant roots near the base of the dead heart. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the ground beneath me convulsed. The reaction was instantaneous and violent. The moment the silver key pierced the dense root mass, the cavern floor didn't just convulse, it writhed. The dormant roots exploded into frantic, thrashing life, not with the previous rhythmic pulse, but with chaotic, uncontrolled spasms. The ground beneath me bucked like a living thing, throwing me hard against the stone wall. The small wooden chest containing the journals tumbled, spilling its contents across the spasming earth. No. The mental voice shrieked, no longer cold and detached, but filled with a searing, ancient agony that ripped through my own consciousness. The connection. The vessel. Impure. The formless presence that had loomed over me seemed to solidify in the darkness, for a split second, a towering shape of shifting shadows and earth, lashing out blindly. I felt a tremendous force slam into the wall beside me, showering me with dirt and dislodged roots. The entire cavern groaned, the very stone seeming to strain under an immense pressure. Silver. Poison. The voice raged inside my head, the mental sound cracking, distorting. You will become soil. All will become soil. The roots beneath me thrashed with renewed fury, tangling, tearing at each other, tearing at the very earth that contained them. Cracks spiderwebbed across the cavern floor. The dead heart, impaled implicitly by the key's intrusion into its network, shuddered violently, then began to crumble, collapsing in on itself with a wet, tearing sound, releasing a final, foul burst of the metallic, decaying scent. This was my chance. Amidst the chaos, the thrashing roots, the enraged mental screams of the ancient entity, I scrambled towards the tunnel entrance. Getting to my feet was nearly impossible on the heaving floor. I crawled, clawed my way through the churning mass of roots, the small journals lost somewhere behind me in the upheaval. The entity's rage seemed focused inward now, on the wound I had inflicted, on the silver poisoning its connection. The cold presence lessened, replaced by waves of pure, uncontrolled agony radiating through my mind. It wasn't focused on me anymore. Reaching the tunnel opening, I looked back into the maelstrom. In the residual, almost imperceptible bioluminescence of the dying roots, I caught glimpses of the entity, a chaotic vortex of shadow, root, and stone, tearing itself apart in its fury, its mental screams echoing unintelligibly in my skull. Then, the floor of the cavern directly beneath the dead heart gave way entirely. With a final, deafening roar that was both physical and mental, the entity, the crumbling heart, and a massive chunk of the cavern floor plunged downwards into an abyss, leaving behind a ragged, gaping hole spewing cold, damp air. Silence. Abrupt, shocking silence, broken only by the trickling of dirt and the echo of the collapse fading into the newfound depths. The mental voice was gone. The presence vanished. The roots lay still, their faint glow extinguished, looking like nothing more than ordinary, albeit disturbingly thick, plant matter. Shaking violently, covered in dirt, blood, and the foul slime from the heart's demise, I didn't wait. I turned and flung myself into the root tunnel, scrambling upwards with desperate strength I didn't know I possessed. My hands, raw and bleeding, grabbed handfuls of the now limp roots, hauling myself up, foot by painful foot. The tunnel felt different now, colder, the roots inert, no longer pulsing with that alien life. My lungs burned, my muscles screamed, but the terror propelled me onwards. Finally, blessedly, my groping hand felt the rough wood of the trapdoor frame above. I pulled myself up the last few feet, and collapsed onto the dirt floor of the cellar, gasping for air, momentarily blinded by the almost forgotten darkness of the upper level. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, listening. No raspy breathing outside the main door. No scraping from the tunnel below. Just the frantic beat of my own heart slowly returning to something resembling normal. It was over. Whatever pact Grandma Elara had made, whatever cycle she perpetuated, I had broken it. The heart was destroyed. The entity, gone. Fallen. With trembling hands, I retrieved my phone from where I'd dropped it near the trapdoor during the chaos below. Miraculously, after a few frantic presses of the power button, the screen flickered to life, the battery icon showing a sliver of red. Not dead yet. The weak beam barely illuminated the cellar, but it was enough. I kicked the small wooden trapdoor shut, the sound echoing unnervingly in the silence. I didn't bother trying to cover it with dirt. Nothing was coming back up that way. My gaze swept over the corn husk dolls, still arranged in their silent semicircle. They looked pathetic now, crude and lifeless, their power, if they ever had any, seemingly gone with the heart. My priority was the main door. I stumbled towards it, using the wall for support, my body screaming from exhaustion and injuries. I reached the heavy wooden panel and listened. Silence. Praying the watcher from before had fled or been destroyed in the entity's demise, I slid back the rusted bolts. They screeched in protest but moved. The door was unbarred. Taking a deep breath, I pulled it open and practically fell out into the familiar, dusty confines of the pantry, slamming the cellar door shut behind me and fumbling to shoot the bolts back into place on this side. Safe. Relatively safe. Leaning against the pantry shelves, gasping, covered in filth, I took stock. I was alive. Injured, terrified, but alive. The journals were lost, but I remembered the crucial parts. Grandma Elara's pact. The sacrifices. The entity. The watcher. The Peterson boy, the hiker, still alive, an imbalance. My thoughts snagged on him. The entity had been furious about him. He must be returned to the roots. With the heart destroyed and the entity gone, was he safe now? Or had breaking the cycle unleashed something worse? Made the woods themselves hunger, as the voice had warned. A low groan came from outside the pantry, in the main part of the house. My blood froze. It wasn't the creature. It wasn't the entity. It sounded human. And painfully close. Someone else was in the house. Or had been drawn here by the chaos below. My muscles screamed in protest, but the groan galvanized me. Adrenaline surged anew, overriding the bone-deep exhaustion. Was it the watcher from the cellar door? Had it somehow gotten upstairs? No, the groan sounded distinctly human, pained. Holding my breath, I picked up the crowbar I'd thankfully brought up from the cellar earlier, its weight a meager comfort. Using the pantry wall for support, I edged towards the doorway leading into the kitchen, my phone's dying light casting a weak, trembling beam ahead. The kitchen was as I'd left it, dusty, cluttered, eerily silent now. The groan hadn't repeated. Had I imagined it? Or had the person fallen silent? Listening intently, I heard it again, a low murmur this time, accompanied by a rustle of fabric, coming from the direction of the living room. Moving with painstaking slowness, trying to avoid the creakiest floorboards, I crept through the kitchen archway. The living room was bathed in the weak pre-dawn light filtering through the grimy windows. Dust motes danced in the grey beams. And there, sprawled awkwardly on the floor near the overturned armchair, was a figure. It was the young man from the woods. The hiker. The Peterson boy. He was curled on his side, clutching his leg, his face pale and contorted in pain. His clothes were torn and muddied, and a dark stain was spreading on his jeans around his thigh. He looked up as my shadow fell over him, his eyes widening first in fear, then recognition. "You," he rasped, his voice weak. "You got out. Are you okay?" I whispered, lowering the crowbar slightly, but keeping it ready. What happened? Caught, he gritted out, gesturing towards his injured leg. Damn trap. Grandma Elara's. Thought I knew where they all were. He coughed, a racking sound. Heard the commotion. Down below. Tried to get closer, check it out. Grandma Elara's traps. Of course. She hadn't just relied on pacts and rituals. Who were you hiding from? Before, in the woods. He shifted, wincing. Watcher. The pale thing. Been dodging it for months. Stays close to the house, mostly. But the other one. Him. He ranges further. His eyes darted nervously towards the windows. He knows I'm still here. Knew I didn't go into the soil. The entity from below. I knelt beside him cautiously, shining the light on his leg. It looked bad, possibly broken, maybe worse. I think it's gone. The heart down there is destroyed. Relief washed over his face, quickly followed by a new kind of fear. Gone? Destroyed. But, the balance. He struggled to sit up, eyes wide with alarm. She always said, the heart kept him partially contained. Kept the woods calmer. If it's gone, the cycle weakens. The balance shifts. The woods hunger. The entity's mental words echoed ominously. Had destroying the heart unleashed something worse, just as it warned? We need to get you out of here, I said, urgency replacing my caution. Can you walk? Don't think so, he grimaced, trying to move his leg and letting out a sharp gasp. Feels shattered. Okay. Plan B. I had to get him help. My phone was nearly dead, useless for calling anyone. The town was miles away, an impossible distance for me to carry him, especially in my condition. Maybe my car still worked. Stay here, I told him. Don't move. I'll check if my car is drivable. If it is, I'll come back for you. Wait, he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong despite his injury. Listen. Do you hear that? I froze, straining my ears. At first, nothing. Then, a low sound, almost subliminal, filtering in from outside. A faint, rhythmic thumping, like a distant drumbeat. And something else, a high-pitched, almost inaudible whine that seemed to vibrate in the air itself. What is it? I whispered. The Peterson boy's face was ashen. They are waking up, he breathed, terror in his eyes. The woods. Without the heart, without him keeping the deep things in check, they are waking up. We need to leave. Now. The thumping grew louder, closer. The whining intensified, setting my teeth on edge. It wasn't just the woods outside anymore. The sounds seemed to be coming from under the house, vibrating up through the floorboards. The house groaned, a low, resonant sound, like old timbers settling, but deeper, more organic. I looked around the dusty living room. The shadows seemed deeper now, the weak dawn light struggling to penetrate. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Then another. Something was moving inside the house again. But it wasn't the watcher from the cellar door. This felt different. Plural. They're not just outside, I whispered, horror dawning. They're in the house. The Peterson boy nodded grimly. The realtor called it charming and secluded, words that usually meant falling apart and in the middle of nowhere. He wasn't entirely wrong. The house stood on a rise overlooking Hollow Creek, a town clinging precariously to the folds of the Appalachian Mountains. It had belonged to my grandmother, the woman I barely knew, estranged from my mother for reasons never fully explained. Now, after her passing and my own recent job loss, it was mine. All mine. Rotting porch steps, peeling paint, and 10 acres of dense, whispering woods included. My first week was a blur of dust and spiders. Grandma Elara hadn't just lived here, she'd burrowed in. Every closet overflowed, every surface held a precarious stack of yellowed books or chipped ceramic figurines. It felt less like cleaning and more like an archaeological dig through a life lived in deliberate isolation. The town itself wasn't much better. Hollow Creek had maybe 200 souls, a single general store that smelled faintly of mothballs and cured ham, and a church whose steeple leaned like a drunkard. The locals were polite enough, offering tight-lipped nods as I drove my battered sedan through the main street, but their eyes held a watchful stillness that pricked at the back of my neck. They were curious, but not welcoming. It was on the fourth day, wrestling with a stubborn jam in the cellar door, that things started to feel truly off. The cellar wasn't on the house plans I'd found. It was just a heavy, bolted wooden door tucked away in the back of the pantry, obscured by shelves laden with dusty mason jars filled with things I couldn't identify. The bolts were rusted solid, requiring a crowbar and a significant amount of cursing to finally yield. Cool, damp air rushed out, thick with the smell of turned earth and something else, something faintly metallic, like old pennies. My phone flashlight cut a weak beam into the blackness, revealing rough-hewn stone steps descending sharply. Hesitantly, I started down, the heavy door groaning shut behind me, plunging me into near-total darkness save for my light. The cellar was small, barely 10 by 10, with a low ceiling that forced me to stoop. The floor was packed dirt. But it wasn't empty. Against the far wall, arranged in a semicircle, were dolls. Not porcelain baby dolls or cuddly stuffed animals, but figures crudely fashioned from corn husks, twigs, and dried mud. They stood about a foot high, their faces blank, featureless ovals. Some had strands of what looked disturbingly like human hair glued to their heads. Others had sharp pebbles pressed into their chests. There were maybe a dozen of them, silent and unsettling in the wavering beam of my light. A shiver traced its way down my spine. Folk art, I told myself, just creepy Appalachian folk art. Grandma was eccentric. But as my light swept across them again, I noticed something clutched in the twig hands of the centermost doll. A small, leather-bound book, no bigger than my palm. My curiosity outweighed my unease. I carefully plucked the book from the doll. The leather was brittle with age. Opening it, I found the pages filled with cramped, spidery handwriting. Grandma Elara's handwriting. Most of it was mundane weather observations, notes on canning, complaints about the price of feed. But then, near the end, dated just a few months before her death, I found an entry that made my blood run cold. October 17th. The nights grow longer. He watches from the trees again. Didn't take the offering last night. The roots are thirsty. Must remember the ritual. Must feed the roots soon, or he will come into the house. He watches. Feed the roots. The words echoed in the damp silence of the cellar. Offering. Ritual. What the hell had my grandmother been involved in? I flipped back a few pages, scanning for more context. September 29th. Sheriff Brody stopped by. Asked about the Peterson boy again. Told him the same. Haven't seen him. Some city folk just ain't suited for these woods. They wander off. The woods take them. The Peterson boy. I vaguely remembered hearing about a hiker who'd gone missing in the area the previous fall. They'd never found him. The woods take them. My grandmother's dismissive tone felt chillingly final. Suddenly, a sound from upstairs. A faint creak of floorboards directly above the cellar. My heart leaped into my throat. I wasn't expecting anyone. The house was supposed to be empty. Snapping the journal shut, I clicked off my flashlight, plunging the cellar into absolute blackness. I held my breath, straining to hear. Another creak, closer to the pantry this time. Someone was in the house. And they were